afternoon everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be discussing quadratic equations. I'm going to discuss with you how to complete the square. So I'm first going to start with a very simple example. Okay, it's an example you can solve by splitting the term. Okay, now the reason why I'm starting with a very simple example is once you understand the steps of a simple example, then as the examples get more complicated in quadratic equations, you'll be able to follow easily and you'll be able to easily understand how to solve the problems. Okay, so let's start with the first problem. Now it's a very simple, very easy problem. Okay, so you have x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0. Okay, so this is the first example. Now obviously it's very easy. By splitting the term you can find the answer, but we are not using that method. I'm going to teach you, how to solve this by completing the square. So it's a simple example. So once you understand this example, then as the quadratic equations get more complicated, you'll easily be able to understand. Okay, so let's start solving this. Okay, so what is the first step here? So guys, the first step here, guys, there's nothing in front of x squared, so you can't divide by anything. So the first step here in that case is whichever number is in front of x, we divide that number by 2 or we multiply it by half. It doesn't matter, and then you square that number, and then you square that number, and then you add it and subtract it from 12. Let me show you. Like this. Plus 12 equals 0. Okay? So this is the next step. So now what is the next step after this? Okay? So now the next step after this is this one here. Plus 7 by 2 square. Okay? 7 by 2 square. Okay? Minus. Okay, so now you obviously have 49 over 4. Okay? 49 over 4 plus 12 equals 0. Okay? So now obviously I hope you understand how you get from here to here. Okay? I hope you understand this. Okay? Now don't worry. I'll explain how we get from here to here in the next example. Don't worry about that. So now just ignore this. Okay? Ignore this expression here. Just like sometimes you think that you don't exist for your crush. In the same way, just think that for now this expression doesn't exist. Okay? So let's do the next step. So the next step is very simple, easy to follow. Okay? So now over here, guys, okay, what is the LCM? The LCM is 4. Okay, the LCM here is 4. So basically what do you do? Okay, what do you do now? So basically, guys, 4 divided by 4 is 1. So you have 49 here. Okay? So now 4 divided by 1 is 4. So 12 into 4 is 49 minus 1. Okay, which is 48. Okay? And then you have to carry the LCM, obviously. Okay? So that is our next step. Okay. So now what is the next step? So the next step here is this. Okay? Minus 1 upon 4 equals 0. Okay, so this is a 4 here, just like here. Okay? Okay, let me just write the 4 again. It looks like, it didn't really look like a 4. Okay, so now this is so now that we've gotten here, what do we do next? Okay, so now we'll go to this side. So now basically you have x plus 7 by 2, okay, minus, 1 by 4 equals 0. Okay, so now the next step after this, you have to take you have to take it to the other side. You have to transpose 1/4 to the other side. So when we transpose 1/4 to the other side, because it's negative on the left hand side, on the right hand side it's going to be positive. Okay? It's going to be positive. Okay? So now what is the next step? So now the next step, everyone screws up very badly. Okay? Everyone screws up miserably. Okay? So there's one thing I want to tell you. Now you see okay, I don't know how to tell you this, but you see, what is the square of 2? The square of 2 is 4. So the square of -2 is also 4. So obviously you have two values, isn't it? Basically you have one value which is going towards the left hand side, one value which is going towards the right hand side. Basically the symmetric values. So basically when we take the square root, we're again going to have a positive value and a negative value, because when you square it, it becomes positive. So that is why now in this next step you have x is 2, okay? So now because we're taking the square root on both sides, this becomes x plus 7 upon 2 and this becomes plus minus half. Okay, this becomes plus minus half. Okay, so what is the next step now? Now I hope you can see here. Okay, so now what is the next step here? So guys, the next step here is this. So basically, guys, now the next step here is this: x equals minus 7 upon 2 plus minus a half. Okay, so basically now you're finding two values. You're finding two values now. Okay, a positive value and a negative value. So 7 plus 1 divided by 2, and you're finding 7 is 1 divided by 2. So basically over here you have your negative 3, okay, and here you have negative 4. Okay, so now these are the two values which you find. So basically guys, this is how you complete the square. Okay, this is called the method of completing the square. So now what I'm going to do is, now the example which I'm going to take, now what I'm going to do guys is, in the next example that I take, I'm going to explain how I came from here to here. Okay, so now the next example that I'm going to do guys, I'm going to derive the quadratic formula, obviously using the quadratic equation. Okay, and as I derive it, I'll also explain how the process of completing the square works. So I just want you to bear with me and just listen carefully. Just bear with me, okay, in this next example, and you'll understand everything, how it works. Okay, so one thing that I want to tell you, I won't tell you again and again, is that I want you to take this down. So I'll give you 2-3 seconds more, and then I'll erase this. And so whenever I'm standing like this, staring in space, just assume that's what I want you to do. Okay, so let's derive the quadratic formula now. Okay, using the quadratic equation. I hope you're all excited. And I've taken so many steps to solve this. So now let's see what happens. Okay, there we go. There we go. I'm just trying to make sure that I get as much as the board as I can, because now it's absolutely clear. You can see. Okay, so now let's derive the quadratic formula. So we all know the quadratic equation: ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Okay, where a is not equal to 0, and a, b, and c are real numbers. Okay, so that's what you have to remember. Okay, because if it's just x squared plus bx plus c, you can't derive the quadratic formula. So just understand that as well. Okay, so now the first step of derive, the first step, some people say the first step is to divide everything by A. Okay, some people say that the first step is you take C on the other side. Okay, everyone has a different notion, a different way of doing it, but it doesn't matter how you do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to just take the first step as, negative C on the other side. Okay, this is my first step. Okay, everyone has their own way of doing it. Okay, so now what is the next step, guys? So now, guys, the next step is obviously dividing by A. So basically you get, okay, so this equals negative C upon A. Okay, so now basically, now this is where everyone has a problem. Now we are going to complete the square. So how do we complete the square? Now this is what you have to understand. Okay, guys, there's going to be one value which is going to come here when we're completing the square. Now what value is that and how do we find it? Okay, so basically, before I tell you this, I hope you remember this formula, guys. Okay, ax squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Okay, I hope you remember this formula. This formula is very important. Okay, so now what you have to do, guys, is you have to make this a perfect square. Okay, you have to make this a perfect square. So how do we make it a perfect square? I'll tell you. So basically you do x squared, okay, plus, so now you multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2. Okay, and now here you add this. Okay, you add this. You add b. You add b upon 2a, b upon 2a squared to both sides. Okay. Now remember, guys, many people will ask me that why is it that over here I'm multiplying and I'm multiplying the numerator and the denominator both by 2, and over here I've left 2 in the numerator. Why is it like that? Many people will be like, why is it like that? They'll probably ask me. Now let me tell you one thing. Now when you get this, you've completed the square. Okay, but now let me tell you one thing. That now the next step here is this. X plus b upon 2 squared. Okay, so when you expand this, you're going to get this. Okay, when you expand this, you're going to get this, and then you're going to cancel 2 and 2 out, and then you will get x squared plus b upon 2ax plus this, and that is how you complete the square. It is as simple as that. So here what happens? So now we have to complete this. Okay, we've already completed the square. Now we have to derive the quadratic formula. So you have b upon 4a squared, okay, minus c upon a. Okay. So now what do we do, guys? Now what do we do here? We might have to use the space up there. Okay. Okay. So let's write this step here. Okay. So now obviously, guys, 4a squared divided by 4a squared is 1. So obviously you have b squared. Okay. So 4a squared, okay, divided by a gives you 4a, okay, because 4a squared is the LCM. So that is why you get 4ac upon 4a squared, okay, because we have to carry the LCM back. Okay, so what is the next step after this? Now remember, guys, that now what do we do? Okay, so this is what, guys? This is, this is squared on this side. Okay, so we have a square on this side. Okay, and now, okay, so guys, what I'm trying to say is I don't know how to explain this to you guys, but because there's a square on this side, we have to take the square out. Okay, so what do we do in order to take the square out? In order to cancel out the square, we have to take the square root, isn't it? So that is why here, let's do it. So basically, you take the square root on both sides. Okay, you take the square root on both sides. So basically now you have just this left. So now when you take the square root on this side, what do you get? You get 4 squared minus 4ac upon 2a. That's what you get. Okay, that's what you get. And then, what is the next step, guys? What is the next step here? What is the next step here, guys? So now, guys, the next step is kind of easy. This is a step where everyone screws up. Remember what I told you. Whenever you take the square root, you're always going to have two values. So that is why it's going to be plus and minus. So guys, obviously here you have b upon 2a, but because it's positive on the left hand side, when you transpose it, it's going to be negative. Okay? So now you have negative, you have negative b plus minus b squared upon 4ac upon 2a. Okay? We've derived the quadratic formula. Okay? So this is basically how you derive the quadratic formula. Now where many people get confused is when you have to complete the square. Guys, whenever you have to complete the square, you have to make a perfect square. So this is how you make a perfect square. Okay? After you make the perfect square, then you continue like this. So this is how you derive the quadratic formula. There are many other ways of deriving the quadratic formula. Okay, but I'll discuss that some other day, some other time. Now, as I've promised you guys, I'm going to take some